Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. This is part 2 of the Batman Arkham series. I'm joined once again by that boy Aqua, Nolan, in the house. He's here to help me pick this bad boy apart. As we always do, part 1 was the story of how we got here, and then part 2 is us kind of getting stuck right into the property we're going to talk about. We are talking about Batman Arkham Knight, I guess technically the 4th game in the series, which is weird.
I consider it the 4th.
Yeah, but it's the conclusion to the kind of main trilogy, I think, is what I would say.
Yeah, people would consider the trilogy to be Asylum City at Night because Origins is so it just really feels like more of a spin-off than anything, which I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you when did you play Arkham Knight? Like, did you play it kind of when it came out? We were talking about it a little bit in part 1, but like, what was your experience with this one kind of after that?
I got it for my 15th birthday, and I basically immediately went home and recorded it for my shitty Let's Play channel at the time.
Good stuff.
Binged through it, basically.
Love it.
And I had mentioned in part 1 that I had really enjoyed the whole mystery of who was the Arkham Knight, because I had never read any comic stuff, you know? And so going through and kind of theorizing and wondering who he is was really fun up until, I'm assuming all spoilers are off the board here.
We're gonna spoil the shit out of this video game.
Up until that fucking flashback with Jason Todd, and I was like, man, I guess that's him. Like, especially too because as I was explaining, I went through the files and I saw that Cash was like, he was like an inch off height wise, and like and he weighed like 10 pounds more or something like that. And so I was like, oh, maybe there's just like a little discrepancy to throw you off. Like, he matched it, I believe, closest to anyone else at the time when I was looking through that. And then I looked through the bio for Jason Todd, and I was like, okay.
I like to imagine you're like that dude from like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. You got like the red string all over the wall, and you're like, but Cash is the same height. But then
exactly.
You're like, theorizing and shit. Yeah.
And then someone comes in with just like a big neon sign pointing to Jason Todd, and at that point, I was disappointed, but like, I also have to admit this part of myself that I am very easily, it is super easy for me to overlook shit in video games, because if I don't like something, I'm the type to just not pay attention to it or just like ignore it. Like, cause I don't like dwelling on the stuff that kind of like disappoints me in a game or something like that. So my initial playthrough, like, I still enjoyed myself. It didn't ruin the experience for me at all, as I'm sure, and not to say that it should have.
Where is he? I got nothing to say to you, Batman. Talk, or I'll crush every bone in your body. Okay. He's working out of a penthouse in Chinatown. I swear that's all I know. If you're lying, I'll break the other one. The other one? Ah!
Enjoyed it a lot. I thought the gameplay was, like I had mentioned, perfected. I'm a big graphics guy. I know people tend to think that like that's very shallow to like praise a game's graphics and whatnot, because it's like, I don't know. I feel like graphics are a weird thing to talk about because, and I played this on a base PlayStation 4. People basically just say like, if you like good graphics, then you don't care about good video games and stuff like that. Like, I've heard that before. Like, oh, you just care about pretty graphics. And while I don't need pretty graphics, I can still enjoy games like Undertale that are very basic and whatnot. Like, I can't lie and say that it wasn't the best looking game on my PlayStation for a long time, and even still to this day is one of the better looking PS4 games.
It is crazy. It is crazy good looking.
Yeah, and so I really enjoyed it a lot. I thought gameplay was awesome. Graphics looked great. Story, I didn't mind. I really liked Scarecrow's new design. I know people kind of criticized him for looking like a bit of an edgelord.
I saw that criticism a lot in sort of the, not the media crit space, but in just like the general review space. I thought like, it wasn't like he had like chains or anything. Like, it wasn't that edgy. He just
but it's like, he's a guy who's obsessed with fear. And like, even in Asylum, he did like the little like hand thing, ooh, you know what I mean? Like,
he's always been.
The guy's been an edgelord from day one. Like,
he's also clearly hitting that fear toxin, you know, in his free time. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
like it's I think criticizing him for being an edgelord is like, I don't know, like that's the point of his character. He's meant to be dark and maybe a little bit disturbing, off-putting, because when he's using the fear toxin, it's the same thing like criticizing Batman for being an edgelord because he always wears black and he tries to be so daunting and brooding, and it's like that's kind of the point.
It's also the world. It's the world they're in. Like
yeah.
The
tone is super dark and whatnot. And anyways, yeah, I really liked it, and then I replayed it in earlier this year. Actually, earlier 2020. We're in the new year now.
Correct.
And it was actually a lot better than I remembered, because I had played the game once, played it again when all the DLC came out, and then I read a bunch of reviews online, watched a lot of videos. There was popular ones were like Angry Joe and Godzilla Mendoza, and they really tore it apart, especially Godzilla Mendoza. And I would assume the reason why I tore it apart so much is because he is a huge, I don't know the guy, but based on what I've seen from his videos, huge comic book guy. And so he notices shit in the story that shouldn't be there that like I wouldn't have noticed in a million years. And so he really didn't like the story, but I found the Batmobile criticism to be like super weird.
Yeah. The
biggest thing I saw was it was overused, which I had talked about in my Arkham Knight video. The Batmobile took up 20% of the game, and that's being biased towards the Batmobile. I counted all the side quests, including the ones that take place entirely in the Batmobile, and I also counted cutscenes in which you are inside the Batmobile. People said that was disingenuous because not everyone would play through all these side quests. But the reason why I use that number is because when I only factored in the main campaign, I cut out any portions where I died in both combat and Batmobile, and it was only 16%. And I also cut out cutscenes. So it was actually not as prevalent as a lot of people had made it out to be. And they also criticized it for being very simplistic in that you just point and shoot. And they said, I'm not playing a Batman game to hit the same button over and over again or hit the same two buttons. And I thought,
that's video games, my guys.
Well, but I was thinking, is the combat not punch and counter for a majority of it? Like, I thought that's a really weird criticism to say you're not buying a Batman game to press R2 a bunch of times and then press square a couple of times to do a special attack. I'm thinking
that's how video games work.
The combat is pressing X a million times. Sorry, PlayStation controls. Pressing square a million times and then maybe pressing triangle. And I just think they don't give it enough. And those people who criticize it for being simplistic also criticize the sections for being far too hard, which I never found as well.
What the car sections, you mean?
Yeah, like the tank sections.
What? Oh,
being far too difficult.
They were pretty simple to get through.
I thought the only major spike was at the end where there's the raid on GCPD, but that for me, that was a major spike for combat too. Like I find I always die once or twice on my playthroughs at that part of the game just because it's so overwhelming. It's numbers wise.
It's supposed to be difficult.
Because
it's like the culmination of like the shit's going down. Yeah. Look, we'll talk a lot about the Batmobile. I think that those people that are criticizing it for those reasons, that's actually not why they didn't like it. I've thought about this. I've thought about literally nothing else since this game came out. When it comes to this game, I don't think people dislike the Batmobile. I think they dislike what it suggests about the tone of this world and what it suggests about the kind of story this game is telling. There is something inherently kind of very comic booky about Arkham City. There is something sort of there is a veneer of like heightened reality to it, and then Arkham Knight is like this kind of, it has that, yes, but it's trying to be a lot more serious in its tone, and in doing so these ideas become like, okay, like it starts to get into that area of like, okay, well, if Batman had this thing and it could blow up other cars, we need to put in the line that explains there's no one in them, you know? And that contradicts the fiction of the Arkham Knight sort of knowing all of Batman's, what's going to make him tick, because really what he would do is fill them with people because he knows he's not going to blow them up. But you can't have that because it's a game, because it suddenly introduces these points of friction that then become like, they create like cognitive dissonance, where it's like suddenly you're thinking about things about the world that you really shouldn't be, because they're not questions that the game cares about. The game doesn't care like what, like how do the physics work of Batman's cape? It doesn't fucking matter. He can glide on it. Don't worry about it. But it's getting into that realm of like starting to ask some of those questions, and then suddenly you're asking questions that are fucking irrelevant. Like,
I agree with that, but I also felt like I didn't feel that I questioned that stuff. Like when you ram into somebody in the Batmobile, how it electrocutes them and kind of sends them flying, and it's a non-lethal ramming. It's just like, I've always chalked it up to like, it's a video game. They have to make an excuse for something. It's the same reason why, like, if Hugo Strange wanted Batman to, in Arkham City, he wanted him to watch the Protocol 10 happen, and then assumedly wanted to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why would you not? Because they had Bruce Wayne captured. Why would he throw him into Arkham City where he knows that he is able to win? Why not just keep him in his holding cell, lock all of the doors, and just make a, whatchamacallit, and just end the game there? And it's because there wouldn't be a video game. It's the same thing. Like, they could have done some explanation where instead of firing a bullet at these tanks, you're firing EMP missiles. That as you fire, say, 3 or 4, instead of it blowing up, it would just be disabled. And while they could have done that, I feel like that would not have looked anywhere near as cool as like actually blowing up the tank.
Yeah.
So
Also, half of the fun in that game is the physics. And I just want to point this out too before we get stuck into the story, which is that driving the Batmobile around Gotham, like pancaking up the streets in that thing, feels fucking awesome. I really like driving that fucking car. Like, it's fun as shit to me. And it
feels like it has so much weight, right?
And the way that you kind of, you know, you kind of crash through stuff and you keep going, and like it just has this. I think some of the puzzles they do with the grappling stuff and the combat mode, it feels very tonally dissonant. I don't necessarily love that, but the inclusion of it is not the problem. I think periodically its use is maybe not handled terribly well, but man, if that thing ain't fun to drive.
Yeah.
I really like some of the chase sequences and stuff like that. Cool. Okay. So for some clarity, as far as like the context of which I'm heading into this for, so I did play it back when it first came out. I played it again about a year later when they'd fixed it, and then I played it this week for this video. I gotta say, coming back to it this time, I just did the main story stuff for time reasons, and I really liked it. I had a really good time with it. I think it hit a lot of the beats that I remembered it doing quite well. There's some stuff that we'll get to when we talk about some of the themes here and like the story and like particularly the twist that we've already alluded to, that I want to try and pick apart and work out what the fuck they were trying to do and like what was happening. But honestly, like for the most part, my suspension of disbelief was in place most of the time. I really liked the Arkham Knight's introduction. Let's just kind of let's get cracked into it. So the game starts on Halloween. The premise is basically that Scarecrow has forced the civilians of Gotham to evacuate. And is it that he's threatening to release a toxin, or he already has? I think he's just threatening, right? He's like, "You got to get out. I'm gonna, you know."
Remnants of Gotham, I have messages for you all. To the vandals who stayed behind to pick the still warm flesh from Gotham's bones, have your fun. You are under my protection. To the cowards quaking behind the police department's walls, you will not be spared. And to Batman, I have already won.
He's just giving a warning. Like saying, if you don't want to, which I didn't really understand why he would give a warning. I just assumed so there's no people in the streets, because then the Batmobile would not work out very well.
Again, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But basically, we start at the game where, as Batman, you're kind of tracking Scarecrow to his hideout, where he's imprisoned Poison Ivy. And Poison Ivy's actually refused to join everyone else in working for Scarecrow, so she's kind of the only one holding out. And this kind of kicks off our pretty interesting relationship with Poison Ivy in this game. So having worked this out, Batman meets with Oracle, who works out it's actually Ace Chemicals is where the toxins are. Through some cool detective, Batman stuff where there's some analysis of some big computer screens. It's all very Iron Man.
Hey, that clock tower is really
so
neat.
Cool. It's a cool
I like
location.
how you touch the statue and everything comes up. I think that's awesome.
It's very cool. I love it. So Batman heads out to Ace Chemicals and investigates the facility where he encounters the Arkham Knight, who has this heavily armed militia that proceeds to occupy Gotham, basically. And the Arkham Knight is like, listen, I know all of your tricks, man. I know exactly who you are. I've got your number, bro. Don't even... I've every tactic that you've got, I've seen it before.
Keep your guns trained on him. If he even looks like he's planning to leave that room, open fire. Oh, and avoid the bat symbol. It's a little trick. It's where his armor's the strongest. Aim for the weak spots, the shoulders first, then coordinate fire at the points where the plates meet.
Please.
You say something?
Leave him out of this.
Always defending the weak and the helpless. It's what I like about you. Predictable. And that's why we're gonna win. We know your move before you do. We know how you think!
Do you know what I'm thinking right now?
Of course, you're thinking.
I'm going to take you down, right? He's quite threatening, and he's got this kind of swagger to him. He kind of swans in. I really like his introduction. He felt very sort of...
Walks in like he owns the place.
Yeah, because he fucking...
Because he does.
Because he does. In like an hour, he occupies the whole city because everybody's left. Yeah. He's a very cool introduction. He's sort of got this militia kind of military looking suit that's similar-ish to Batman's, but he's got this kind of cowl on that looks like Batman's, but it's this kind of full face helmet, which I thought was really cool. But it's unclear if it's modeled after Batman or what the deal is there.
It seems like it's more of a mockery of it.
Yeah, he's like
of the
sending
cowl,
it up,
and I like that.
And he's sort of got the Arkham symbol on his chest as well.
Yeah, and I think like another, just while we're talking about design, I think what at least I assume Jason was kind of going for, is that he believes that he does what Batman does, but better, because he kills criminals. They can't recommit a crime if they are dead. And so I think in his mind, he's taking up a mantle of looking like Batman, kind of having those same gadgets and whatnot, because his idea is that he is a better Batman in it. And so I think making a mockery of the suit in a way with like the cowl and whatnot is a neat choice.
It is. And I also like that he doesn't have a cape. There's nothing heroic about it. It's all very practical. It's these sort of heavy military, like sort of heavy industrial buckles and things, It's a very kind of well thought out design, I think. So Batman does sort of overcome his forces and locates Scarecrow within Ace Chemicals, who's built this, he's basically turned the whole building into this bomb, right? This toxin bomb. And Scarecrow reveals that he's now kidnapped Oracle in the meantime, so this was a distraction, which is something that'll come up a lot in this game. And he exposes Batman to the toxin before he gets away. Batman, in the midst of this bomb beginning to go off and shrouded in this toxic fear gas, stops the blast from going off. But just as he does, and just before he passes out, he is confronted by the Joker, who we know to be deceased.
Can you hear me, Bruce? Oh, don't act all surprised, Bats. You knew this was going to happen sooner or later. Me stuck deep inside you. Together, we're going to give the city what it deserves. A new Batman. A better Batman. A darker one. Well, we can come back to this later. First, we need to agree on some priorities. Sure, you've saved the city by reducing the blast, but Ace Chemicals is still about to explode. You need to start looking out for yourself. After all, you're brooding for two now. subtlety and nuance of a napalm enema.
This is the first big twist of this game. Give me your like knee jerk. What do you think about this sort of this
I think
moment?
it totally kills the ending of Arkham City because now Joker's not dead, and it's like, what was the point of killing him off if you're gonna bring him back? And the thing that always conflicted with me is that, unfortunately, the parts with the Joker story-wise are the best parts of the game. Mm-hmm. And so that's what kind of rubbed me the wrong way about it, is that it's like, I feel like it shouldn't be here, but if it wasn't here, it would be a significantly worse product overall.
So this is like an issue that is weirdly mirrored in the Dark Knight trilogy as well, where it was clear that they had opposite. In fact, it was clear that Nolan had planned for the Joker to come back in the third one, but obviously with Heath Ledger's him passing away, they couldn't do that, so they kind of had to rewrite it. But it's interesting to me, like, this is a common trope in a lot of media where you kill off like a beloved character and then they immediately come back as like a psychic projection or like in someone's imagination, a ghost or something, right? And this is kind of an issue for a few reasons. One of the worst offenders that I want to mention just here is in Sherlock, which is Stephen Moffat's Sherlock series. They kill off Mary, who's one of the core cast, and like the next episode, she's back as a vision in John Watson's head. And the result of this is that you're never really allowed to miss the character, because the whole point of the reason that loss is difficult in real life is that it's not that someone is or isn't, like, the reason loss is difficult is that person no longer exists and you can't interact with them. Like their presence is gone completely. And when you do this in a story, it like, you don't get the opportunity to miss them. So when they come back, you're like, okay, I guess. There's no...
Yeah, like, I feel like it violates one of the biggest rules of storytelling, which is they are telling us that the Joker's death has affected everyone. They're telling us that, like, you know, it's left an impact, but they're not showing us. What they're showing us is that Joker's still here just for you, so you don't have to... Because, like, even Batman kind of grieves a little bit. In the DLC to Arkham City, Harley Quinn's Revenge, his voice just sounds weird. And you can tell that something's up with him. And so we're just... In that DLC, we're shown what the impact is, but in Arkham Knight, it's more like we're just told that it's had an effect on him and not shown that.
And I think it's a curiosity to me that, again, like the guy who killed the Joker, Paul Dini, is not on this project, and you have to wonder: is this decision driven by, you know, Warner Brothers, Jeff Johns? We want to bring the Joker in. We want to. He's the main dude with the success of Heath Ledger's Joker. He's the pull here. Or was it genuinely them trying to be like, this will be a kind of cool, interesting, you know, story twist? Because I agree with you, man. That's the thing that's conflicting, is I agree that he's the best part of the game in a lot of ways, but also
and, like,
he just has no play, like, even tonally, right? Tonally, this story is so much darker and like less whimsical, and he, you know, the saving grace obviously is that he's a mental projection, so he's kind of given some freedom to be a little less realistic, but this story is trying to be this gritty, like, you know, there's a lot more military stuff in this. The armor is less comic booky. The car is less comic booky. You know, everyone.
It's hyper realistic.
It's hyper realistic.
Yeah.
And then you've still got the Joker from Arkham City, who isn't that necessarily. But regardless,
one thing I want to mention about the Joker that I think is really cool is in his design. When he first comes back, he looks like hell. But as the game goes on and as he begins kind of crawling his way through Batman's mind, his character model looks healthier and healthier. And in your final interaction with him, he has almost no blemishes on him at all.
It's like the inversion of Arkham City, where he's getting worse and worse.
And I think that's really neat.
Yeah. Again, little details like that are pretty phenomenal. Now, at this point in the story, we get a flashback that reveals that before Joker died, his infected blood was used in blood transfusions and infected 5 people, including Batman. Now, Bruce has hidden his infection from everyone else here and has imprisoned the 4 infected people who are physically and mentally becoming the Joker, which is a thing that happens in this, I guess. And the Joker now exists as a mental projection produced by, I guess, the blood and the fear toxin, or at least by the blood and then is kind of exacerbated by the fear toxin, and constantly appears to Batman and sort of manipulates his perception of reality. You know, he's like hanging around the city, he's appearing on billboards and stuff. He's kind of everywhere in this one. Look, I don't know how I feel about the idea of the blood making people into the Joker. It's kind of a cool, interesting idea. It's been done in comics a little bit better, but at least it felt fresh at the time. I don't know. It's very weird in comparison to the rest of the story.
Well, and I want to bring up Godzilla Mendoza again, because he brought up a good point in that it completely goes against the core of the Joker, which is he's just a normal dude that had a really, really shitty day. And now it's not a matter of, being one bad day away from that worst case scenario. It's just the guy's blood. Now it's like he's some special being.
Right.
And I think it... And pardon?
Yeah, well, that's interesting too, because isn't the whole point of Batman that he can be anyone? Same with the Joker. Yeah. It's like the Joker is just Batman if he had a bad day, right? So it's like, the point of them is not that they're special, but making him, I don't know, it just felt very weird to me.
I felt like it made sense though.
Yeah.
Because in Arkham City, when you're punching Freeze after getting injected with the Joker's blood, his head appears for a little bit, the same way it does to the in the Arkham Knight boss fight. And so I like that it's clear that this was an idea that they were going for. And I think that, that Batman turning into the Joker is, I feel like, it kind of makes sense within the story. And it's clear that he wouldn't be transforming as fast as the others, not only due to his own willpower, I guess, but also because he took the cure, which I think might have slowed down the process, especially with the Lazarus element in it.
Yep.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. It does make sense. It just, the fact that he's literally becoming the fact that they're physically becoming the Joker is where I find it is kind of weird.
Well, and you mentioned it tonally clashes. Like we have this hyper realistic story, but now we're going to throw something that's more of a comic book thing into this very realistic story. And they don't portray it in a very realistic way, from what I saw.
Exactly. And I think that tonal clash is where the game kind of ends up sort of focusing a lot of its attention, is the anachronism of the Joker versus what's actually happening in reality. And I think they increasingly play that up to the point where it's like, as Bruce Wayne, it's hard for him to tell what is real and what is actually this kind of projection. So as the story goes on, it does sort of start to land a bit more for me, but it still really throws me off, even just like in concept. But so Batman escapes after Ace Chemicals just goes up in a huge explosion, and he lets Gordon know about Oracle's kidnapping, and Gordon, in fucking classic fashion, just storms off and he's gonna go find Scarecrow by himself.
And he punches Batman, which I thought was cool.
It's good.
And I think what I like is that, it's clear that he feels really guilty about it. And, we know Batman could have stopped that.
Yep.
And so it felt like he let him get that punch in. And I don't know, I kind of like that, because it's like you can tell he feels guilty about it, and he knows that if he was in that situation, he would have done the same. And I kind of like that Gordon gets a free hit, and I think they both know in that scene that he deserves it.
Yeah, and he's kind of it's like a weird form of self-punishment where Batman's letting himself get hit because he knows that he did the wrong thing. Yeah, it's a really strong characterization of both of them. And sets up the dynamic. Again, this is like a really complicated sort of family dynamic between these three characters with Batman, Oracle, and Jim Gordon. Really like grounded kind of family relationship in this kind of hyper-real comic book story. Which again, like it's so subtle and nice, and then in context with the scene before where you've got this Joker, like it just sort of it's already leaning into that dissonance pretty heavily. But so Batman works out that Scarecrow has recruited this businessman, Simon Stagg, to build Cloudburst, which is this huge dispersal device for the fear toxin. And we get this pretty interesting sequence where you as Batman kind of you locate Stagg's airship, and you sort of fight through the process, you sort of fight through the stages of the airship to locate Scarecrow. Batman confronts Scarecrow and is hit with more fear toxin, right? So he's feeling like he's getting a hold of things, and then bang, more fear toxin. It's not looking good for old Brucey here.
In this scene,
and he reveals his plan, sort of, and what's going to happen. What's his goal here? He tells Batman, he's like, look, I'm going to keep juicing you up on this fear toxin, and then on live TV, I'm going to demask you and show them that Batman is a person that feels fear, and I'm going to strip the symbol of its power. This is sort of his...
You're making God believe.
Betrayed by those you trust the most, your darkest secrets revealed. As I tear your mind apart, Gotham will watch. I will cut that mask from your face, and the whole world will see the fear in your eyes. Then they too will understand. There is no savior, no more hope, no more Batman. Maybe it's already happened.
Yeah, exactly right. Somewhere Zack Snyder just creamed his jeans. It's a very strong statement about what this game is about, in my opinion. This is sort of the villain speech. In literary sense, this is where you're sort of your villain provides their worldview, explains their motivation. This is a guy obsessed with fear, and he's like, I'm going to prove that even this god, feels these things.
You can break the unbreakable.
Break the unbreakable, and it's a discussion that happens a lot in the Batman stories, which is like about this idea of the symbolism of Batman. And I think Scarecrow attempting to show that the man behind the symbol, I think the goal is to contrast this with Bruce's internal struggle. Because in some ways, the Joker's death has stripped him of this kind of compass that he was relying on, right? We see it in Origins where it's like, the Joker for him is the thing that Batman is trying not to be. It's the thing he's resisting. And in the absence of the thing to resist, he's kind of lost, or seems to have lost, like what being Batman means, Or that's at least how the story is kind of portraying it. There's no sort of northern star that he can set himself against. He's got to kind of find his own way. And you can see throughout, even in this scene, he's kind of starting to question what being Batman really means. And his fear of losing control and becoming like the Joker is the thing that makes him in this story commit these small concessions like over and over. This fear of like, well, I don't want to kill, like it makes him hit thugs a bit harder. He starts to use the Batmobile a bit more often to bulldoze problems. And you see in this scene, like, just before the Joker takes over his body, like, you can kind of tell, like, this is also something that maybe Batman kind of wants. He kind of maybe wants to let go and kind of give into this, Yeah. It's like, you can see him being like, I would be fucking unstoppable. And
it's the thing that, like, villains have told him from the start in, like, any form of Batman media. It's that same, like, he catches them, beats them up, they'll just get out again a year later.
And they're not wrong, right? Like Scarecrow, who you put away in the first game, he's back at it.
He literally got eaten by a crocodile,
and he's apparently totally fine now. But it's like, but ultimately, before Scarecrow can kind of get his way here and execute on this plan, the Joker takes over Batman's body and beats the ever-loving shit out of Arkham Knight's thugs. It's sort of... you get access to this ability to just start pummeling dudes on the ground, which is very cool. You start to see, like, if you did let this person off the chain, if you took Batman, if you took the weights off, as it were, this is Batman uncaged. He's a dangerous fucking piece of machinery, this guy. And I this scene for me works really well. I like the idea of the Joker kind of takes over, and there's just this single opportunity to really show the end result, right? If he keeps going down this path, what's it going to look like? He's got all these resources, he's got this brutality, he's going to become even worse than the Arkham Knight. He's going to be fucking unstoppable.
Yeah.
What did you kind of, like at this point, because this is really where the game is like laying its themes down. It's like, okay, this is about fear and symbols and legacy in a lot of ways. The legacy of the Joker, the legacy of Batman, this idea of that they should both be deconstructed by proving that these are both people. How is this stuff like kind of sitting for you at this point in the story, or like where's your head at with how this stuff is landing?
I I found it was really good. I liked it a lot, especially the internal conflict with the Joker. I think the way that they portrayed and visualized this slow takeover was done really well. And like you mentioned, like you get a glimpse into how Batman would be if the weights were off. And we see that on another occasion near the end of the story, where at this point you actually get a takedown where you can just flat out kill people and like snap necks, and it really also kind of goes to show you how much he's holding back like all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool that up to this point in the story, as Joker takes over more, and because mixed in with this Joker taking over thing, he's getting more desperate. And so in that desperation, we saw that in Arkham City. When he gets desperate, he gets more aggressive. He doesn't fuck around. And, there's a point where he just becomes more frantic. Like, you can kind of hear it in his voice. He's normally very stern and calm, but he starts getting more aggressive and like he sounds unhinged. And that's why I think the voice acting was was done so well.
Yep.
It's so good. It was just a super neat transformation. And I appreciated that, for example, when you first start the game, you interrogate someone like normal. You hold them up, where's yada yada, mm-hmm. right? But by the time you're like 2/3 of the way through, you're trying to find, I believe, where Barbara is. You have a guy's head underneath the tire of the Batmobile, and he has the accelerator in his hand, and you just squeeze it, and you can see it just going against his head, and it's like, that's brutal for fucking Batman. Like, that's bad.
It's intense, man.
And
yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's intense. It is uncomfortable. It is, and I think it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I think what's really cool is that as the player, we feel the same way as Batman. We're like, no, we don't want to see him turn into that, but like,
but also, God, it feels good to hit that hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard. Like, the game gets you into that because you're used to being this, like, visceral kind of physical force, and then suddenly you can hit a bit harder, and you're like, oh, this does feel good. Like, it kind of, I like that the gameplay mirrors that as well. But you're right. So basically what happens is Batman locates Oracle in Scarecrow's hideout. And when he arrives, she's sort of behind this glass box, and she's exposed to this fear toxin, and she shoots herself in a very confronting scene. That is like that I always forget is in this game, and then I replay it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, this is here. How did that land for you? Did that fake out work for you? Were you like, okay, she's definitely gone, or were you like, this is a comic book, she'll be fine?
I was kind of like, okay, that sucks. It doesn't surprise me, because I went into Arkham Knight knowing that it would be the finale mm-hmm. of the trilogy. Because they had mentioned it up to that point, and I didn't play it right at release, so I saw online that it definitely was a finale. And I thought to myself that, I didn't 100% buy it. I was like, oh, that sucks, and like, the scene works, but I was like, if she comes back, I would not be surprised. And
fun.
I was also thinking to myself, I was like, well, Scarecrow hasn't really executed much of his plan yet. So why would he just, boot her off now? Because that's his leverage.
That is his leverage.
And so I think it worked fine. I think the story probably would have been better off if they didn't even bother with it. Because this is now 2 points where a character is dead and they are resurrected, and it's like...
It's going to happen again with Jim Gordon a bit later too. Like it... Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of a... It's like they saw it in The Dark Knight and they were like, wow, that was a really cool fake out. Why don't we just do that multiple times? I don't know. I still like the scene, but I think the idea of Scarecrow using it to push Batman even further is pretty interesting to me. Like, it's again him trying to like prove like I'm gonna break you. That's his plan.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, while this is happening, and this turns out to be again another misdirection, Harley Quinn seizes Batman's base in the Panessa movie studio, where she's going to rescue these Jokerized patients. And so Batman and Robin head in, and together they capture Harley and the infected patients, but not before one of the patients, Henry Adams, kills the others before committing suicide, believing that the Batman will become the perfect Joker, which is an interesting concept because, again, I didn't realize... Well, I guess, yeah, like you were saying before, I kind of always thought of the Joker as just a guy, but suddenly he's like this kind of piece of mythology or something. I guess like in the same way Batman is, you know?
They turned the Joker from this... It made it more like, I don't know, Joker reminded me a lot of like Pennywise or something like that. Like it's this like mythical being of sorts, and it's like there's always going to be a Joker, and his blood just kind of, the whole blood thing really ruined it for me. And so I did enjoy, though, like getting past the whole, okay, yeah, the concept is stupid. I did enjoy the whole twist where Henry's like, I'm gonna purify the gene pool.
Yeah,
I thought that was cool.
It's
I was
pretty
like,
good.
Oh shit.
Yeah, that was a twist that I didn't see coming. I was like, damn, okay, this game is playing hardball.
And the twist of him actually turning out to have been kind of lying to Batman the whole time. I thought that was cool too, actually.
Yeah, he actually gets
coming.
one up on Batman and Robin. Like he beats them ultimately, and that's cool. I like when he's not always kind of one ahead of the pack. You know, it's nice to see him kind of get beat, even just by this random guy. You know.
Yeah.
But so Robin, while this is happening, Robin is putting all the pieces together in his head, and he's worked out that Batman is the fifth person. And he tries to trap Batman in one of the cells, but Batman actually gets one up on him and traps him instead. And Robin is like losing his fucking mind because like he's blaming him. Yeah, he blames Batman for Barbara's death, and he's just like losing it, man. And rightfully so. Now we kind of get to the shit hitting the fan part of the story where Batman's kind of failed everybody, and the Arkham Knight activates the Cloudburst, which floods the city with...
Well, before we do that, we should mention that in the Panessa Studios scene, or in that sort of dungeon in the game, we do see flashbacks of Jason Todd getting tortured.
Right. Yeah.
By the Joker.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about it. So, yeah, we get to see. So we get this taunting of Batman about Jason Todd. You know, it's coming up again, and we get the flashbacks of in Arkham Asylum somewhere. During some time period that we didn't see before Arkham City, but after Arkham Asylum, Jason Todd is sort of tortured by the Joker.
Yeah, it was explained in a Arkham tie-in comic that it was like as Joker was in his Titan form at the end of Asylum, that's when Jason Todd supposedly escaped.
Okay.
I don't know when that comic was released. I can't remember if it was before or after the events of Arkham Knight. I would assume after, because it would have given away
assume
the
after
events of it.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And we sort of see the Joker trying to turn Jason Todd against Batman, trying to turn Robin against Batman, and seemingly succeeding in this torture scene. Now, you know, for some historical context, this moment was kind of controversial in comic books where when this happened, people actually took a vote on whether or not Jason Todd should die. And they sort of wrote and illustrated two different follow-up comics, one where he did in fact die, and then one where he lived. Famously, people voted to kill him, which is great. And then they brought him back a bit later on as Red Hood. But it was a few years. Like, they left him dead for a while. And when he did come back, it probably was a twist. But this basically sets up the Red Hood concept here, which is that, you know, Jason Todd comes back and he's sort of, he's forsaken all of Batman's morals, and he's going to kill criminals Joker's way. He's going to get a gun, and he's going to start murdering some dudes. And he's going to come after Batman for revenge.
Yeah, and it's really cool because he's, as we mentioned before, he is that embodiment of if Batman crossed that line. Because if Batman crosses the line without the Joker influence, I guess you could say, that's essentially how he'd be as the Arkham Knight.
Absolutely. He's rational, he's militarized, he's just ruthlessly efficient. And there's no clear suggestion yet that he is going to become the Arkham Knight. I still was like not 100% either way, even though in the comic book context, I was like, this could be a fake out. This could just be something they're using to torture Batman. I wasn't super convinced the Red Hood thing was coming. But for a lot of people, I think this was when they sort of were tipped off, that, you know, the game kind of tipped its hand a little bit. And we talked about it before, but I think the weakness here is not necessarily doing this flashback or having him be the Red Hood. It's that he's not in any of the other games, really. He's not really in this one.
Yeah.
And that's kind of odd, because there's a lot of opportunity I think they had to do something a bit different with it, or introduce this concept earlier. I don't know, like there's...
Well, I think a major theme of the Arkham Knight and Scarecrow plays into this too. Like, I think a big theme of Arkham Knight is sort of like the whole ghost from your past kind of thing. That's why the Joker's in there kind of coming back, and Scarecrow's coming back from Asylum, and the Arkham Knight is meant to be that character who is someone that Batman knows and is meant to be kind of a ghost from his past, and yet we don't really see that as the player. And I think that's where it falls super flat. Like, if it had been a character from Asylum, and even if it was someone like Clayface, who we had, at least, it's like we knew that character existed in this universe. You know, there was no mention of Jason Todd until Arkham Knight, and I think that's what kind of killed it, because then it made that part of Arkham Knight feel almost more separated from the trilogy than Origins.
Which is already a hard thing to do, because you've got this dissonance of the Joker's involvement, and it's like, then you've got this thing which feels anachronistic in the world, and it's just like there's a lack of cohesion here. It doesn't feel connected. Like you said, it's sort of it's really hard to identify why exactly that is, but I think it's just that if this was the plan, then there is so much in Arkham Asylum, particularly the diaries from the founder of Arkham Asylum, that have this like, there is Amadeus. There's this like deep involved mystery of like who this fucking guy. I was like, maybe the Arkham Knight would be like his descendant or something. Like, there was a lot of stuff here that they could have really played with, and it could have been like a reveal of like, oh, it is Jason Todd, but actually he's been in all of the games. You know, he was in disguise. He's been watching, or some recontextualize it, because you can do that kind of well. Sometimes it can feel kind of hacky, but it just sort of felt like. Unless you knew the comics, then this isn't really it's a very out of character flashback that makes itself obvious by being different. And I think that's probably what would have tipped people's hands if they didn't necessarily know the comic context.
100%. Because I didn't know comic context, and I was immediately like, yep, that's him.
Right.
Like, it has to be.
Well, because who else?
And yeah, exactly. Cash.
Cash is a good choice.
They honestly, they could have made it Azrael. That would
have been good. Azrael would have been good.
I feel like they could have done something like that, especially because I feel like Azrael's side quest feels super weird in Arkham Knight, but we can get to that later.
I could see Azrael. I could also see like doing something with the League of Shadows and Ra's al Ghul and
maybe it's Talia.
Yeah, Talia, because of her involvement.
She has all the reason to be pissed off at.
She has good motivation.
Yeah.
It's just there's a lot of a lot of space for them to have done something different. I don't dislike the choice they made, but yeah, it feels very anachronistic. And again,
I think I can see why they did it, because it's such an iconic character.
Yeah.
Jason Todd. But I also feel like they were just kind of they gave us a payoff without any sort of build up or work for it. It's like in I'm trying to think, like, if you make a Spider-Man game, Venom has to be on the table. But you kind of have to work up to that.
Yeah. And
so it's like you can't just necessarily throw him in there, because you need the foundation of Eddie Brock and whatnot. And it's like, it is like if you're playing Spider-Man PS4 and then you get a random flashback where it's like, oh yeah, there's this guy named Eddie Brock who I was kind of a dick to, and then suddenly Venom just shows up. And it's
doesn't feel great, yeah.
And I think, like, so there's a part of me that understands that, like, yes, as an iconic character that, like, in a Batman trilogy, if you want it to be as definitive as possible, yeah, it would make sense to include him. But if you didn't have it set up, then I just think you didn't have it set up. Especially when the Arkham series has already ticked off so many boxes for the villains list. It's like if they miss one or two, I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, that's it, man. And you know, it's sort of, yeah, it's not so, it's, you know what, honestly, it's not so much that him being included rubbed me the wrong way, but it's that the other games went out of their way to not just replicate comics.
Yeah.
And this game is like, no, we're just doing Red Hood. We just gave him a different name in the interim.
I think now that we discuss it more, it's like the Arkham Asylum City and to an extent Origins was very much a blend of realism and a comic book story. Instead, this feels more like a clash.
Yes, and I think that's what's lost with Dini's absence. Like,
It's feeling like oil and water.
Absolutely. Whereas the other one's kind of blended nicely. This it feels like the two parts of a separate whole, which is only going to increase as the story goes on. And then we'll talk about it when we get to kind of the ending in a little bit. But so the Arkham Knight activates the Cloudburst, which floods the city with this very dense fear toxin. It's a very cool visual effect in the game. The city, it's very cool. The kind of city,
there's like lightning somehow.
It's very cool looking. Like, it's just like, it feels like the end of the world, if you know what I mean. Like, it's sort of
it could have only gotten cooler if you were able to like swoop down into the clouds for a little bit. Instead, if you swoop down, you're just dead. I get that, but it would have been cool if you could do it for a brief moment and then like swoop up on the other side. But it's one of my favorite parts of the game because it looks awesome.
And it really conveys that idea that, like, this is not going well. Like, Batman's lost here, and he's kind of got to do everything he can to bring this situation back. And so what he actually has to do is convince Poison Ivy to use some ancient tree sort of network running under Gotham that is going to help neutralize... or I guess strip, the spores are going to strip the fear toxin out of the air if he can destroy the actual Cloudburst itself. And so they sort of bring their plan to fruition. And they destroy the Cloudburst, and she kind of clears the toxin. But in doing so, it seemingly uses up all of her kind of life energy. I don't know what. She kind of just becomes dust. It's very weird and out of very not this universe a thing to happen. It's very weird when she just kind of fades away.
I didn't even think about that. Like, how does that even happen?
I don't know, because she's not like a different being. She just was like chemical, like, you know.
She can just control plants. She isn't made of plants.
No, yeah. Do you know what? Like, it's not. She's not a plant, so it's very weird to me that that's kind of how she goes.
Damn, I never thought of that until now.
Yeah, like, she's not. Also, no other character has ever had their powers, you know, cause...
Like, using their powers so much to the point where they die. And now that I think about it, it's like...
Yeah, Clayface doesn't
have so pointless.
X amount of transformations before he just becomes like a puddle of dust or something. It's very weird to me that's...
Because I praised her death. I thought it was cool. I thought it was really neat that, you know, Poison Ivy in Asylum was... a foe, but she kind of came back around for the betterment of the city. But now that I think about it, I think that's probably exactly what they were going for, where they're like, oh, we'll just kill them off so that it seems like they made a huge sacrifice.
Yeah, which I get. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I have no problem with her dying. It's just the execution's so bizarre, because you're right, like, she's a character that we've kind of had this weird emotional arc with, where, you know, over the story of the 3 games, we've gotten to know her quite well, whether it's through Batman's lens or through Catwoman's lens in City. Yeah. And, you know, for me, I'm like, I have a really strong understanding of this character and what she stands for, and I agree with most of it. You know, she sort of, she does manage to kind of engender herself with you as the audience and the player and Batman. Yeah. But it's just it's a strange sort of choice to have her have this weird supernatural death. I almost think it kind of cheapens how human her sacrifice was in some ways.
Yeah.
Well, a point of comparison that I often bring up is at the end of Watchmen. So in the comic book at the end of Watchmen, Rorschach dies, and he dies a man. right? The symbol of Rorschach is supersedes him, and you know, when he gets killed at the end of that, it's just his normal human corpse in the snow, just dead, like any other dude, because there's nothing unique about him. Same thing. Conversely, in the movie, Zack Snyder's movie, he's like vaporized, like he gets turned into dust, and he's just like this kind of smear of dust. You know, he gets this kind of mythical death where he's able to transcend and become a symbol. And while it's a matter of taste, I recognize one of those works really well for me, particularly in the context of this story where Batman Arkham Knight is very interested in symbols and legacy, and to have her kind of, the implication here is that her sacrifice, the sacrifice of her life here immortalizes her in some way, immortalizes her symbol in some way. And that's interesting to me, because then when we talk about the bit that's going to happen next and the ending and the complicated themes of legacy and Batman and the Scarecrow and Red Hood and all this stuff, it's interesting to me that she's allowed to die and kind of become something ephemeral and larger than reality, whereas none of the other characters in this story are ever afforded that kind of death. Save perhaps the Joker, who sort of ends up becoming a myth himself. So I'm not really sure what the story's trying to say with it, but it is an interesting anomaly nonetheless.
And I think it would have been better if she had just not died, to be honest with you. If it had been like, she has now helped all that she could, or maybe they could have done something where she was just so drained that she's like, I need to rest for a little bit, like I'm out for the rest of the story. They could have done that. You know, I think about how would I have liked this to have been done, because the only reason why I can assume that they would have killed her is to tie up that loose end. You know, she's been a prominent figure in Asylum and City, and everything that they wanted to say about her was probably said. That idea that she's not necessarily a villain, and she just kind of wants to keep to herself, keep her plants healthy, and she's not trying to get in anyone's way necessarily. Right. And I think that's also why she doesn't want to, you know, join Scarecrow's plan, because she's not trying to get in anyone's way. She's trying to just take care of herself and her plants. And I think the only way to tie up that loose end is to either get her to somehow leave or kill her off. And so I was thinking, if they do want to tie it up that way, the way that they ended Mr. Freeze's arc in the DLC, I thought was done really well, because him and his wife sail off, the arc is finished, and it's like a very nice, happy ending.
It's exactly what I was thinking of, actually.
And it was super, super powerful. That's one of my favorite arcs in the Arkham series, just because of the way that they ended that. I thought it was really, really well done.
Yeah, and it's almost like they're going for a similar thing here that they did with Mr. Freeze, where they're going for that kind of Heart of Ice style, like, you know, that you realize, because one of the biggest strengths of the Batman stories is that ability that he has to empathize with the villains, right? Sometimes his biggest superpower is that he gets where they're coming from. And as you say, he's one bad day away from becoming them. So he gets it. And he gets why they're doing it, and he gets why they're so extreme.
Two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
Exactly right. And that she's allowed to die is like her reward for being so good in the end, for making the right choice in the end, which is interesting. I will try and pick through it when we talk about the ending in a second, but yeah, it's an interesting plot beat. I'd love to know, for anyone listening or watching, like, how did that Poison Ivy stuff work for you? Because every time I hear someone talk about it, everyone has a different take, and really different opinions. I would love to know what you think. It's one of those things that keeps me, it keeps me thinking about why that was and how it was intended to land for the audience. But I think crucially, while all this is happening, at each step of the way, the toxin is progressively weakening Batman to the point where they barely get across the line with this plan. Like, he is on the ropes here. He's not looking too hot. But he pursues the Arkham Knight to a construction site where he's going to go rescue Gordon. And this is where we get our kind of conflict between the Arkham Knight and Batman. We
did have a prior conflict in the Cloudburst tank.
They do, yeah.
which just want to say that boss fight was like not it was not my favorite.
Yeah.
Do you disagree?
No, I don't. The boss fights in this game just are nowhere near as good as Arkham City. I hate to be the guy to say it, but that's just the dang truth of it.
I think like I actually don't mind the concept of the Cloudburst fight. This idea of like you're doing stealth and it's a different take on a stealth fight.
Yeah, but did you want to set up tell me like what's the setup for the boss fight? Like how does it play out?
It essentially you try to stop the Cloudburst, but the Cloudburst is actually mounted on I guess greater version of the Cobra tanks, which are these tank-like enemies that are in the game, which are they essentially have like these huge laser beams on them. Like I don't even know how else to describe it. It's like an actual laser shot.
Fuck off laser, yeah.
And they can lock onto you and they move fast, and the only way you can take them down is through stealth. And so you actually get a taste of this fight, I think, twice before this actual encounter. And so while this encounter is happening, you kind of know what the deal is. And so you have to kind of sneak around a little bit. And a part of it feels clunky because you are sneaking around in a tank. But I didn't mind it. I could see why. I could definitely see why you wouldn't like it. But if somebody liked it, I could be like, yeah, I could kind of see why. I'm very neutral on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I think everyone's mileage is going to vary on this based on how much they already hated the car. The thing that was disappointing to me, or that continued to be disappointing to me with the use of the car, is that there was never an option to just do it another way. So like I was kind of expecting more and more for the game to play with the concept of like, here are multiple options to approach this. You can do it partly with the car, partly with on foot. You know, they do that a few times in side quests and stuff like that. But the main game, whenever the car is used by and large, it's like, okay, well, this is a car sequence. So don't worry, just you're in the car. And that was the thing that I think probably rubbed some people the wrong way, was that you couldn't do it another way.
And I think especially on harder difficulties too, because when you're on, say, New Game Plus or something like that, Arkham Knight's tank takes multiple shots to go down. And when you're doing the same thing where you're like sneaking around a corner, get a shot in, and then you book it the other direction, and doing that over and over again doesn't help at all. They didn't expand on that fight at all throughout the phases.
And it also doesn't introduce any new mechanics at that point either. You've kind of played with it. It doesn't really evolve them terribly. It's not a bad boss fight. It just isn't a particularly good one. And I think that at this point in the game is maybe what it needed, because of the fact that the sequence we get next is the actual in-person boss fight. It's the then on foot one. And it's kind of like, you guys had this opportunity to really prove why this tank, this cool car is in the game, and it just kind of fell flat. It kind of fell flat, and that's just disappointing. I want it to be better, but it just isn't, and that's fine.
And I think that's the issue too, is that I don't think I didn't see a lot of critics saying that the Batmobile was bad. It was disappointing because it is standing toe to toe with the stealth and combat that have been, I would argue, perfected. And it is so, as you said, polished and refined, and it is so good. And then when you put it next to something like the tank, and I feel like it's unavoidable because it is their first crack at it, it feels worse because it's right next to these other aspects of the game that are so good.
That is such a good point. I hadn't thought of it like that. Yeah, it is. It is very underdeveloped in comparison. They always wanted to do it. There's a reason that the car is in the first game. They originally wanted to do it with Arkham City, but they just couldn't work out the geography of it to make sense. So it's something they always wanted to put in the games, but yeah, you're right. Like it doesn't have the benefit of 2 games worth, 8 years worth of iteration.
Like if the Batmobile was in Asylum the same way that it was in Night, like the same tank style, I think nobody would have complained because it's in that same primitive stage that the combat and the stealth was in, and I think it would have been fine because as you mentioned, as the games have gone on, they would have evolved it more.
I just wonder if the tank stuff at all, you could have just had it be a car. I don't know.
Probably would have worked out better.
Part of me that's like, then you could have done really interesting, more intricate kind of racing stuff. There's some of that in the Riddler side puzzles, but it felt like an opportunity to it's there in parts where it's like, okay, well, in the Batman animated series, one of the best things is like, these big, really cool car chase sequences where they're pancaking through Gotham and, zipping through the streets and stuff. And, Robin's on his motorcycle coming to intercept. And it's like, it has a cool, like, action James Bond style vibe to it. And that's maybe what I thought they were going to lean into more, but it just kind of ends up being a tank sometimes, and that's fine, but yeah, I think it takes away some of the mystique as well of the Batmobile as being this kind of the fantasy car, it's
because now that you mention it, you don't spend a ton of time in the Batmobile. You spend most of your time in the Bat tank, and you don't do a ton of driving. But I also wonder, how could they make just driving a car that interesting, especially when I preferred to glide around the map rather than use the car. I didn't drive the car much unless I was forced to.
Yeah, I drove the car a lot. Maybe it's just my brain's broken, but I liked, because I don't do racing games, right? I don't play car games. I don't really, so for me, like, it's always refreshing. I mean, I've been recently replaying the Mad Max video game, and that's a lot of driving. I really like it because it's an RPG that centers on a car. But yeah, something about the way that Batmobile handles felt good to me. And so I voluntarily drove it a lot, as well as, grappling and doing all that stuff. But yeah, it's a very controversial sort of difficult thing to unpack. But I think, at this point in the story, particularly gameplay wise, everything is ramping up, right? The shit is about to hit the fan. We're about to get a huge kind of siege sequence. And it felt like this attempt at a boss fight maybe would have been either better placed later or kind of developed more. It's hard to say, but either way, Batman kind of pursues Arkham Knight to a construction site where he's going to rescue Gordon. And the Knight in this conflict reveals himself to be Jason Todd, the previous Robin, who was seemingly murdered by the Joker and has been left traumatized by the Joker's torture. And Jason sort of blames Batman for abandoning him. We've brainwashed, exactly. So we've talked about this a little bit. And the way that this twist landed, but there's kind of a few things that come to mind here that I think are worthy of discussion, which is, one of the main questions at the heart of this story in particular is, and the previous one, is like what makes Batman who he is exactly, and where are the limits? What's he willing to do and what isn't he willing to do? In Arkham City, Ra's al Ghul and Talia are pushing him to kill the Joker. They want him to join the League of Shadows and fulfill his destiny, as the new Ra's al Ghul. But he refuses, and this game kind of examines a similar kind of theme, which is, Jason Todd was this prodigy that Batman was raising to become Batman, right? That's the goal ultimately, is to have someone replace him, continue the legacy. And instead, Todd, is this corruption that takes all of the tools and beliefs and they're sort of twisted and made malign. And I think the implication here is that if Batman gives himself to the Joker completely, this is what he's going to become. It's exactly what you were saying before. This is like if he had another bad day, this is where he would go. But maybe more
the Batman who laughs.
Exactly right. Yeah. And perhaps most crucially, which is exactly what that story examines, it's that this symbol could be corrupted. It's less important that it's Bruce Wayne doing it, and it's more important that it's like the idea is destroyed, or that the thing it represents is destroyed. And it's sort of, I don't know,
I found that it paralleled, you already brought up the Dark Knight, it kind of paralleled how they capped off Harvey Dent's story in did I say Arkham Knight? I meant Dark Knight. Yeah. In Dark Knight, I mean, the way they kind of capped off Harvey Dent's story is that they blamed the murders that Two-Face committed on Batman because it's about preserving that symbol and not corrupting that symbol, because if that symbol gets corrupted, then in that case the Joker had won. And it kind of parallels what I think Scarecrow is trying to do in this game.
Absolutely. And it kind of it leads into that idea of, like, I mean, in that story, it's like, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. That is like the very thing that is happening here to Batman.
Yeah.
Like, he's been,
and it's happened to Jason Todd.
Correct. And it's that, and so this game is about fear, right? It's the central theme. It keeps bringing it up again and again and again. And Batman's greatest fear is that he's going to become that. But perhaps not so much that he's going to become that, but that he knows it's inevitable, right? If he doesn't stop, he knows he's one bad day away, and he's had a lot of bad days recently. And I think it's that fear of like crossing that line. Now, Jason escapes from this conflict, and he sort of, Batman challenges him a little bit, but there's no real like philosophical discussion here. It's very protracted. Sorry, it's unprotracted. Yeah. It's very quick. They sort of, Batman's like, you know, we can get you help or something. It's very flat. It's like a flaccid line, and then Jason just kind of fucks off.
Not what he made you.
Stop talking to me! You did this to me.
I'm sorry.
You left me to rot in that abandoned wing of Arkham for over a year. With him.
It's not too late. We can fix this. Together. Alfred, I found Jason.
Excuse me, sir. I must have misheard you. For a moment, I thought you said that you'd found Master Todd.
You heard right.
My God, is he all right?
No. No, he's not.
They don't pit their philosophies against one another. There's no like, I never wanted.
There's no talk or any sort of conclusion.
It's so weird to me. It's so weird to me that they don't kind of have that argument. They don't have that debate. They don't kind of. Batman doesn't say, you know, this is why I believe. This is why it's important not to cross the line. That never happens. Yeah, and
I think what's worse with that is that it makes it feel like this entire build-up for the game was not a build-up towards a clash of these two characters and their ideals and their personalities. It felt like it was just a build-up towards a boss fight, and now the boss fight's done. It's like they're okay, done. Go back to Scarecrow now.
Yeah, and I hate to, like, it's an unfair comparison, but bear with me. One of the things that it reminded me of is in the original Fallout games, particularly Fallout 1 and 2, at the end of those games, you spend the entirety of those games kind of working your way up toward the main villain. It's like a classic video game structure. But the thing that those games do, New Vegas does it as well, is at the very end, right, you kind of do all this story stuff and you go somewhere and you go into a room with the villain and you talk it out and you debate your philosophy, and you have those games do it brilliantly because they're RPG heavy, but you know, you have to actually convince the villain that they're wrong based on information that you've learned throughout the story or based on their philosophy. You know, you have to actually philosophize with these characters, and you have to outthink them or outmoralize them, or you've uncovered knowledge they don't. You know, in 2, it's like you have to basically prove to the super mutant master that like super mutants are sterile, they can't have kids, his plan is doomed, right? There are other ways to convince him, but you actually have to have been paying attention. You have to kind of beat his philosophy, and that's kind of what I was expecting Batman to do, to be like, okay, well, this is everything I've learned and why the way that you're going about it's wrong. This is what I've learned from this experience, and this is like what I stand for. But it's just, he shows him an ounce of compassion, and apparently this is enough to flip Jason Todd on a dime. Which either speaks to how shallow the Joker's brainwashing was, or just kind of what you were alluding to before, which is that it does come across as a bit of a plot contrivance that he kind of just fucks off and the boss fight's over. But then we kind of do get the guy in the room scene at the end, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, for the most part, like, it just doesn't do anything for me. This moment, it's a very weird, stilted interaction.
It's a neat set piece. I can at least say that.
Yeah,
like the fight itself was neat.
It's cool.
But as far as the story goes, it was like, okay.
I also liked that, you know, he's taunting you the whole time, and he's being like, why don't you try this tactic, you fucking idiot? And then every time you try something, he sees it coming. It doesn't quite have the same impact as the freeze fight, where that...
Oh, yeah, no.
You know, that fight's like every time... You can only use the type of takedown one time, and then he's going to see it coming.
Well, and half the fight I just spent taking out his henchmen, because that's where the challenge comes from. It doesn't come from getting to him, because getting to him is relatively easy. The challenge comes from taking out his lackeys that are surrounding him before you're able to actually get on to.
I suppose we should set up the fight, which is that you're in this big kind of hangar in this construction site type thing in this skyscraper, and he's
in 4 different quadrants.
There's different quadrants, and you kind of always know where he is, and he's got these goons that are running around protecting him, and you have to take them out before you get to him. And they can be tough because they throw different combos of thugs at you. But it's pretty...
There are some thugs that are invisible, or that are invulnerable to your detective vision.
Yeah,
so
the worst is when they've got that jammer, and then someone is invisible and someone else has got, something else, and you have to be really like... You got to kind of sequence your takedowns to make sure that you can kind of get away with what your plan is. But also,
and that's where stealth is at its best too. So it's not like these stealth encounters were bad, but it just didn't feel like much of a boss fight, as it felt like more because with each time when you take out these henchmen and you finally do a takedown on the Arkham Knight, he loses a quarter of his health, I believe, or it might be a third. And then he moves to a different quadrant of the room, and a new set of guards come in. And so what I just didn't appreciate was that it kind of felt like it was more one stealth scenario after the other while you have just someone perched up on a gargoyle, rather than actually fighting the Arkham Knight.
And kind of, you could imagine getting progressively overwhelmed if dudes just kept pouring in the whole time. I was expecting it to be like, oh, there's like 40 henchmen here, you're completely fucked, guy. Like, that would have been really cool to see, like, really throw a challenge at us. But, what's there is again, perfectly fine. And that's sort of the theme of a lot of these big moments that involve this character is they're fine. And that's, they've set a standard with the previous game that is just so much higher than that.
And even Origins had really good boss fights too.
It really did. There's some very good ones.
Yeah, Origins, I think... Origins, I think, probably had... I think the best boss fights in the series, just because they were consistently really fun. I still think Mr. Freeze cannot be topped. But I wanted to run it by you, because I always had this idea that a cool fight for Jason Todd would have been a hybrid between something like the Deathstroke fight and the Mr. Freeze fight, where you have to use these different combat takedowns on him. And each time you do it, if you do a beatdown on him, where you stun him with your cape and then mash square, he'll learn. And he'll counter that, and you won't be able to do it anymore. And I think that would be a really neat idea, because then you could do something like you could do a takedown on him, but in order to do that, you need to build up your combo. So you'd have to build up a combo of 8 on whatever lackeys are in the room with him, and then eventually use that takedown on him.
Yeah.
And I think that could have been done really well. And obviously improve on some things from, like, if we're using the Deathstroke fight as inspiration, like, don't have it as automated as the Deathstroke fight was.
It became like quick-timey at times.
I was on hard, and there's a point where you have to counter, and each and every time a little prompt showed up on the screen that said counter and then triangle, and I was like, we're like 2-3 hours into the game, I know how to counter.
Yeah.
And it was I just wanted to get that out.
You're like, that's a gripe I've just been sitting on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree, man. I think the idea of him adapting and like slowly you running out of tools to beat him with would have been really cool. Like, as you say, he gets progressively better at sort of dealing with your tactics, but maybe you're kind of also knocking out some of his gadgets. So by the end, it's like a bare knuckle brawl, kind of like the Deathstroke fight, where you're just going at it, Yeah,
like it'd be cool if he had some sort of weapon that he was using, like some sort of baton or something like that, or maybe like, did Jason Todd ever use a staff, or was that only a Tim Drake thing?
It's primarily a Tim Drake thing. Jason Todd was mostly punches.
Well, if he had some sort of weapon, and you'd be able to use your grapnel gun to pull it out of his hands, and you could like break it or something like that, and then work something out where you're both kind of whittling down each other's bag of tricks. Yeah. And so eventually it's just
and there was plenty of cool story opportunity too. Like, they could have given him, the chain that the Joker had him chained up with, and the lead pipe that the Joker was using to beat him. Like, you can work
the crowbar.
You can work in some of that stuff, and you could have it be symbolic. I was shocked that some of that wasn't worked into his costume, to be honest, because I thought that'd be kind of cool. Maybe too edgelord to have. But who knows?
That could have been. That could have been just another thing that clashes with like the realistic tone, though.
Exactly. So it's tricky, because when you're trying to do this comic book thing, and you've got this very heightened kind of militaristic,
and the foundation is just so like all over the place.
Yeah, it's tough, and yeah, again, like the tone of that fight works, but the ending doesn't really get us anywhere. He just kind of fucks off, and I'm like, okay, cool, but sure.
And I think I want to talk about this a little bit while we're on the topic of it. When he does eventually show up later on, he shows up when you're kind of trapped by Scarecrow, and he basically just shoots one of the handcuffs and just breaks you free, and that is it. And so it's like, it's not like his arc is finished later on, because all that tells you is that to an extent he has forgiven Batman, which is like,
also it happens off screen. We don't even get to see it. Like, we don't even get to see like his change, his like him. I cannot fathom why there isn't, again, that scene that we were talking about where they have a fucking debate about it, or something else where you confront him or he confronts you before that final moment, and Batman has to like try and convince him, you know, or someone has to.
Or
try
like
and
I could totally see something where like after that philosophical debate and whatnot, after he realizes he was wrong, he just like collapses into Batman's arms essentially. Yeah. And just says, like, you know, that he was so angry and frustrated and so traumatized, and he took it out on him when he shouldn't have, and that and he can realize how many people he'd killed and hurt, and could have been cool.
I mean, if you want to go down the like full thematic circle route with Gordon, right? You have that fight at the end. They're both out of gadgets, and you know, Batman's got him pinned down, and he's like, "Fucking finish the job, man!" And Batman refuses to do it. You know, Jason gets back up, starts beating him. Batman's not fighting back. There's no counter prompts. Yeah. He just takes it, and Jason just, you know, beats him until he's, you know, within an inch of his life, and then then he's gonna lose it and be like, "Fight back, you coward." You can kind of work a lot of that together, and you can show that parallel of like, yeah, this is kind of Batman's fault for dragging him into it, but also it's not his fault. You know, it's the Joker. But I just think like there's a lot of emotion that is there that just is never kind of utilized very well.
Yeah, and you can get into that theme of like, you know, yeah, it's the Joker's fault, but there wouldn't be a Joker without Batman.
Which is sort of like what Origins is about, and it's sort of what like this game is also kind of about. It's like now there literally couldn't be a Joker without Batman.
Yeah, and it's two sides of the same coin. They both went through a traumatic event that was essentially just pure chaos, and in Joker's case, he decided to completely embrace it and run with it. And in Batman's case, he decided to become a control freak about it.
Yes.
Because that's essentially, like, he follows the law and order, even when it's, like, borderline contradictory, or even when it doesn't make the most sense and it's not the most efficient way to do something.
Yes. And there is this concept that, like, you know, what makes society and what makes civilization is the resistance of baser instincts, right? The reason that we have society and money and cars and we don't walk around killing each other all the time is like that. The civilization is the resistance of those base urges. It's what makes people civilized. Yeah. And Batman is like the ultimate version of that, where everything in his life is funneled into this like this locus of control, which is like an order, and it's like he represents the very opposite that Joker does in a lot of ways, but also, like with anything, if you go to an extreme too far, you become the thing that you're trying to destroy. You know, absolutely. If the Joker takes his ideology too far, he becomes like Batman, and if Batman takes his ideology too far, he becomes like Joker. And I think you see that with Jason Todd, where it really pushes Jason into the role of the Joker in some ways. But yeah, I just think it's disappointing. We'll maybe talk about it when we get to the confrontation with Scarecrow and how he fits into that in a second. So Batman...
I do want to mention...
Yeah, you go.
Sorry, last thing. I just want to say that I think it's really cool that Troy Baker voiced the Joker in Origins and also voiced Jason Todd.
Oh, I didn't know he did both. There you go.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong, I'm going to get killed.
Sounds right.
I think... Yeah.
Sounds... Wait, no, that's he.
I'm
yeah,
quickly
no,
Google
he definitely was the Joker in Origins. I didn't know that he was Arkham Knight, but that would make sense.
Yeah, because he sounds just like Delson Rowe.
Oh yeah.
And you're not gonna unhear it now.
Yeah, that's. Oh god. Okay. That snotty kid. Okay, fun. Yikes. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a cool parallel, actually. kind of like that.
And I just think it's neat that it's like it just so works. Yeah, it is Troy Baker. It just so works out that he voiced the Joker in a previous game, and now he's turned into.
It's pretty cool, actually. I like that.
Yeah.
He's a very talented dude, Troy Baker.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they were going for that because in that year, Troy Baker was literally in everything. But
he's in everything every year. But good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, that is interesting. Actually, I didn't pick up on that. So Jason Todd he flees, and Batman and Gordon confront Scarecrow on the building's roof, where Oracle is revealed to be alive, and her suicide is like a result of Batman's hallucination.
Oh, you did it. I must admit I had my doubts that you could make this happen.
I'm not asking again.
And I'm not talking to you. It is time.
Time for what? Jim.
I'm sorry. It was the only way. Get me my daughter.
Dad!
Barbara. Are you all right? Did he hurt you?
What are you doing?
Call in the transport. We're leaving.
Yes, sir.
It is time for the people of Gotham to see their savior for who he truly is. A man, just a man, devoid of hope, betrayed by his friends, crippled by fear.
Let her go.
You both still have a part to play.
We had a deal.
Once I understood your greatest fear, controlling you was simple. You blame yourself for her condition. You need to protect her, but buried deep down is the inevitability that you will one day fail. And that fear makes you mine. Think very carefully about your next move, Commissioner. Her life depends on it.
Dad! No!
Did you think I wanted him dead? Did you think that would save your daughter? Do you know what happens when a man refuses to be controlled by his fears? He must face them.
No! Take me! Please, it's not her you want. Take me!
You don't scare me.
Shh. It's okay to be afraid.
She's thrown off the roof, but Batman catches her and he returns her to the GCPD. But the Scarecrow gets away with Gordon. Now, with the Knight's remaining militia, Scarecrow assaults the GCPD to try and strip away Batman's allies. Well, that's what Batman thinks is happening. This turns out to be another misdirection, the 10th of this story, allowing Scarecrow to kidnap Robin. In the meantime, this keeps happening in this narrative where it's like, big event over here. Don't look over here where clearly we're trying to distract you from something. Yeah, it's a lot. It happens a lot. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll tackle the ending of this game where we'll talk a bit about Robin and Gordon, and we'll talk a bit about Bruce Wayne. We'll talk a bit about Scarecrow.
And this is actually just following this happens directly after the situation on the roof, where it might be a lot of you guys' favorite scene, because the Batmobile gets destroyed for a brief moment and it blows up in spectacular fashion.
Yes, very briefly, and then we get another one because he had a backup.
And a worse looking one too.
I kind of like that it's a bit shittier. I'm into that a little bit. I'm into that it's kind of.
I like it,
crappy.
but I feel like if you're at the apex of that and like the big fight, you want the big guns. You don't want the
like
prototype.
the cool new Iron Man suit. You don't want the shitty homemade one.
You want, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I kind of see. I feel maybe I'm just like a nerd for this stuff. I like in like in Spider-Man: Homecoming. You know, he has to use the shitty suit because there's nothing without it. I felt like they were going for something similar, but because no one liked the Batmobile, it didn't quite land.
Well, the Batmobile functioned the exact same. It was just a different skin.
Yeah, you know what I was hoping? I was hoping that it didn't have any of the tank capabilities.
Yeah.
And it was just going to have to be, he was going to have to work out a way to do this without it. But
that would have been cool.
Missed up. We can speculate for hours of what they could have done with the Batmobile. I would love to know, while this outbreak is running, in the comments, let me know what you think they should have done with it, because I bet people are going to have some crazy awesome ideas. We're going to duck away for a second. You're going to listen to some products, potentially a service, potentially a podcast. I don't know what's being advertised. Check them out. We'll be right back in just a second. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by the Maynard Trigg series. MaynardTrigg.com is where you'll find them. They are my brand new low sci-fi, low fantasy, coming of age novel series. The first one is out right now, plus a free short story, and the second book will be dropping really, really soon. Go check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it. MaynardTrigg.com. Welcome back. We're on the home stretch now, baby. We're gonna get to the really fun stuff. Getting into the ending.
Oh yeah.
Very excited. So, to save Robin and Gordon, Batman surrenders to Scarecrow. This is sort of the outcome of the siege. He realizes he is outgunned. He is outmatched. He decides he's gonna kind of surrender. And he is taken to Arkham Asylum in a very, very cool recreation of the opening scene of Arkham Asylum.
Oh yeah, near beat for beat.
I love it when that happened, because they also do that in Arkham Asylum, where
during one of the Scarecrow sequences,
and it's the Joker's driving you, and I was like, this is kind of cool. I like this thematic repetition. It's very cool. Batman's taken to the ruins of Arkham Asylum. Where Scarecrow on live TV reveals Batman's secret identity, Bruce Wayne, to the world.
You need to trust me, Jim. Now. Wayne. Bruce Wayne.
Now the world can see you for what you truly are. A legend laid bare. Powerless. Human. Afraid.
For just really juicing him up with a lot of fear toxin. It's a lot.
And it was cool because even Scarecrow was shocked.
Yeah,
he was surprised too.
He's like, you should definitely be dead after this. But
no, he was shocked that it was Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, because he was like, "Oh, what?" Like I thought that was cool.
It's nice that he's also surprised. I kind of appreciate that. Now we then get Batman kind of descending into the recesses of his mind, and there's this kind of battle for control with the Joker, where the Joker is sort of attempting to weaken Batman by like talking about all the people that have suffered and died because of him. But Batman kind of wins out and locks the Joker away in his mind, which seems to like cure him of this Joker disease thing. The implication is that I guess the Joker's biggest fear is like being forgotten or kind of fading away, I guess, is what this seems to imply. How does this work for you, this sequence?
I actually think it works really well for me.
You're like, oh no, don't descend on me in the comments.
No, I'm just, because allow me to get a little weird and a little personal here.
Mm-hmm.
I have OCD, and so if I don't wash my hands like really well, I will get an itch under my skin, and it's like a physical manifestation. I didn't know that could happen, but it drove me nuts for years. And so what I found out is that I did something called cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah, CBT. Yeah.
And it's basic. I don't like saying CBT because then people say cock and ball torture, and like all the 12-year-olds start laughing.
Oh,
yeah. And so like it is literally a matter of the way I sort of was able to get through that was through kind of putting my hands down and just sort of ignoring it, and that is how it would go away. And so it got stronger as I worried about it more, and like that itch grew stronger as I worried about it more, and I am now able, I don't get that itch like ever, because it's that idea of like, this thing isn't real, it is just a figment of my mind, and my mind is strong enough to repress that and to just ignore it, and once you ignore it, it kind of goes away. And so seeing that kind of represented in Arkham Knight, I kind of thought that was cool, because I was like, you know, I feel like that kind of makes sense, because Batman is having these physical manifestations of the Joker, and it's like this little demon that he's worrying about and he's always in fear of, and that fear is what makes it grow stronger. So as he gets hit with more fear toxin, unless he confronts his fear and unless he learns to ignore it, it's going to consume him. And so I thought that, you know, the way that they portrayed it, in the sense that like you're in kind of Joker's shoes and you're in like this first person thing, I thought that was awesome.
It's very cool.
Because it showed that argument that kind of took place, and that he's saying like, oh, well, look how many people died because of you, Batman. Look how many people died because of me, yada, yada. And it reminded me of that struggle that I had with myself, where I had to literally have an argument with myself and say, well, I know that I wash my hands and I use hand sanitizer. And like, so for me, I thought it was really, I don't want to say accurate because it's not the same thing, but it made perfect sense to me. And I felt like it was really well done.
Yeah, it felt like emotionally true.
Yeah, and so I think obviously I'm in the minority. It hit me way different than anyone else. I was totally like, that was fucking awesome. And I don't want to say that it's like perfect or anything, because it's still built on that foundation that we've kind of discussed is like a little weird and tonally clashing, but I liked it a lot. It was super personal for me.
That's that's what good art does, honestly, is it kind of taps into something personal, and it makes it, you know, brings it to the forefront and lets you kind of, experience it and process it.
Yeah, and so that's why I feel like I was debating on bringing it up, one, because I don't want to talk about it too much, but also because I know that it is super subjective, in that I'm probably one of maybe like a couple hundred people who had like that similar experience and kind of felt that same way. And so, but yeah, that's why I like.
And you will be forgotten, Joker. Because of me. I am vengeance. I am the Knight. I am Batman.
Max, wait! No, please! No!
Goodbye, Joker.
No! Bruce! Don't leave me! Please! I need you.
Was good.
Yeah, I completely see where you're coming from. I mean, for me, you know, it's like with anything. I mean, like, you know, I suffer from crazy anxiety and depression and stuff like that, and you know, when you think about like what it's like to constantly be negotiating with yourself every day about this stuff, you know, there's that internal negotiation where you're like, there's nothing to be anxious about. This is just a normal thing that people do. Nobody's looking at you. There's nothing to be, upset or feel uneasy about. But, you still feel those things. And it's learning to, not focus on them and to let yourself focus on other things and develop techniques to overcome that stuff. And, in this moment for this character, right, the whole story's been about fear. And Batman's kind of become he's kind of become the victim of this fear, right? Of this threat to his foundation, right? His very makeup is at stake here. The very thing that defines him as a person is now on the line. Is this question of like, should I cross that line? And he's so afraid to cross that line. He's so afraid to become that thing because he knows it's bad, right? But he knows he's capable of it. And I think that this moment where, it's sort of, he decides that he's sort of in his head, the Joker's biggest fear is being forgotten, right? Is being kind of not sort of fading away, not having meant something. That's not Bruce's fear. Bruce's fear is corrupting the symbol he was able to build. His biggest fear is like becoming the thing that he's fighting against. And it's interesting to me that when his fear is losing himself, it's almost like the game is saying, okay, well, the story is saying, okay, well, if you're so afraid to lose yourself, then the one thing you need to do is find out who you are and defend that and decide actually, I am in control. This is my own mind. I'm in control of myself and my actions, and I need to take accountability for that. And in locking the Joker away, he's not unkilling all of the people that have been harmed because of him. He's not undoing any of that trauma, but he's owning those decisions, and he's saying, and yet it was still worth it. I would do it again. Yeah. I would do it again. I'm not going to cross this line just because I fucked up a few times and people got hurt. This thing is worth pursuing. And it's sort of, you mentioned it before, but the story is plagued by this kind of foundation of quicksand in a lot of ways, where everything is from all these dissonant places, and it's trying desperately to kind of wrangle it all together and have it like mean something. And Batman overcoming this fear, I think the sequence works well. It's weird and unsettling, and the first person stuff is really cool. And I like the way that they kind of taunt each other, and you get to experience the Joker's fear of Batman, and you suddenly get to understand, like,
especially because it actually scared the shit out of me, to be honest with you, when I first played it. And like, even though I've played the game a million times, it still spooks me. Like it's
unsettling.
Really neat sequence. It is. It's super unsettling.
I was playing through the this final part of the game a few nights ago, and I was just incredibly high, like way too high. And that moment where the you're going through, there's like a dark area, and there's all these statues, and you have the flashlight, and he's moving.
Right.
And
every time you turn around,
that freaked me the hell out, man. I did not like that.
Yeah.
I did not like that. And it works really well. And I think for a lot of people it doesn't work because of everything we've already talked about. It's the setup. It's not the payoff that's the problem.
100%.
But he locks the Joker away, and Jason Todd arrives and helps save Batman. And then, so I guess, he rocks up and he shoots the wrist bracelet away, and Batman and Gordon kind of beat the stuffing out of Scarecrow, and then Batman juices Scarecrow with his own fear toxin. And Scarecrow on live TV freaks the fuck out and sees, his biggest fear, which is apparently Batman, I guess, which has nothing to do with any of the thematic ideas in this story. Don't know why they played it that way. I don't, like, it doesn't, like, why not just beat the shit out of him? Using the fear toxin's weird to me.
But I think the thing is, though, is that it's like, this is contradictory, but I think it's because Scarecrow doesn't care about getting the shit beat out of him. He spent a couple of years hanging out with Killer Croc, almost being eaten.
True.
Like, I think for him, like, he is no shit kicking could ever be as bad as that. But then, on the other hand, it's like the reason why I guess you wouldn't want to do that is because he's not afraid of it. Mm-hmm. But then why would Batman be the thing that he hallucinates? What I'm wondering is, because Scarecrow's fear toxin isn't really explained on like how it affects different people, because when we are in the Scarecrow sections in Asylum, there is of course the restriction of the fact that it is a video game, and that it can only go so far. But we're told in the final encounter, they said that he's pumped us full with enough fear toxin to take down 10 men. And so it could be that in super high doses, that's when you get things like, you know, like full-on hallucinations, like you're in another world and you have to use a spotlight to take down a giant scarecrow. Yeah. But I feel like in smaller doses, it's more of a hallucination of... It's a hallucination based in reality, so it's something akin to, like, seeing the Joker in reality when, like, he's not actually there. And so I think he just got a dose that was enough to make everything around him scary, and because Batman was in that vicinity and he was looking at him, it turned into like this unsettling thing. But I feel like now that I'm saying that out loud, that was kind of a lot of mental gymnastics to get to that conclusion. It
makes sense. It makes sense. It just like it makes logical sense. It just doesn't necessarily make emotional sense.
100%. And I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to like explain. I'm trying to at least give my theory on like how they could explain it.
It's like that stuff's interesting to me because like a lot of the time when things like that in stories work really well, you kind of don't care about the logistics of like the situation. You're not sitting there being like, this is kind of what I was alluding to before with the tone and these dissonant kind of pieces. Is like, you don't sit there and go, well, how can he glide on a cape? You don't care because it feels emotionally true to swoop in on some dudes and grapple up and, you know, choke people out and be this cool like Batman character, you know.
And it doesn't break that suspension of disbelief.
Correct. And that's because that stuff feels visceral and it feels right. It feels correct. And it's hard to identify why that is, but it just is. And this ending like is good, but that moment with Scarecrow, like for some reason it just doesn't necessarily, like for me it doesn't feel as emotionally resonant as it could. And I don't know if that's just a matter of taste. I'm assuming mileage is going to vary on this a lot. Maybe some people really like it. But yeah, look, it's an interesting one. My biggest kind of thought around it is when we've kind of talked through a lot of it so far and brought this stuff to the surface, but these ideas of like fear and legacy and overcoming kind of the thing that is holding you back, you know, I guess in some ways Batman is taking that fear and weaponizing it, right? He's actually able to use that and control it. Which we see thematically represented in the after credits sequence, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's sort of, I guess it's representative of him taking control of that fear again. Because that's the thing that Batman does. You know, he used to own that fear. That used to be the tool he used to bring about his version of justice. And it's been corrupted and turned against him in the form of Jason Todd, in the form of Scarecrow, and in the form of these villains. And he's reclaiming that. He's saying, no, this is a tool that I use and I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it because I am in control. It's exactly what you're saying before.
Yeah, and it's that and it's that getting over that, because Batman's like one true fear that I think has been seen across the entire trilogy is failure, failing to save the city and whatnot. And so I think like his moment where he overcomes that fear is when Scarecrow says, I'm going to kill all your friends, everyone's going to die. And he's like, good, do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know that's like the Joker talking, but I think that's like, I feel like that kind of represents where he is at that point, because he can't show weakness or else it's going to get exploited through Jason Todd, Scarecrow. And just while you mentioned Scarecrow being kind of underwhelming, I feel like the reason for that for me is that Scarecrow never felt like an actual antagonist. He felt like a catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
He did more to set up the main villain, which unfortunately again was the Joker, and that's why Arkham Knight just kind of fucks off. That's why Scarecrow just gets knocked out. Like there is no conclusion, because I don't know if they were. It feels like they weren't meant to be the main villains, but they were just treated as such. And so they're basically playing a role that they're not meant to fill. And so for Scarecrow, it's like the only purpose Scarecrow really has is to just put Batman in a situation where he has to go somewhere. He's there to inject him with the fear toxin. Like, Scarecrow himself, without the Arkham Knight, doesn't pose a huge threat to Batman. He poses more of a threat to the city. Scarecrow is a villain that he's taken down before on occasions where he's pumped full of fear toxin to the point where his entire world is a hallucination.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's probably why Scarecrow was like kind of shoved aside so fast, because now that the conflict that Scarecrow was serving as a catalyst for is done, we have no need for him. But I think the issue is that Scarecrow was kind of played up as the big villain, like in trailers and whatnot, and especially at the beginning of the game. And so I think that's just what kind of killed it for me. That's why I felt underwhelmed by it. And I think maybe I'm trying to theorize why they would just kind of shove him to the side.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a fake out, right? It's like the fake out of the Scarecrow being the bad guy. I mean, it's a cool twist in the game. Like, if that moment isn't spoiled for you and you get the Joker appearing, it's like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. I kind of tend to agree. I think, yeah, it's a tricky one to have to discuss, because I don't see how they would have done it any other way with the setup they had. Yeah. I don't see how else you resolve this. They kind of wrote themselves into a corner in some ways.
And that's just goes back to that foundation that we talked about.
Yeah, and it goes back to like, well, what are the ideas you're bringing to bear, and what are they in service of? And I think whatever the magic was they had in City and Asylum from a narrative perspective, they capture some of it, reliably, but there's something lost here. And whether that's Dini's influence, whether it's the specific project team, whether it's the length of the project, whether it's the fact that it's the third one, it has to be the conclusion, whatever the case is, something here doesn't resonate the way that it necessarily does in the other stories in the series for me, and that's just a shame more than anything. Like it's sort of.
And I think I agree, and I realize now I've never really found a way to articulate this, but I think I kind of let Arkham Knight's story off the hook a lot, because I feel like they did the best that they could in almost every situation. But the best that they could do with the foundation that they had is still not up to par with everything else.
Yeah.
And it's like what you said with Scarecrow. It's like, yeah, that's probably the best way that they could have done it, considering their foundation. And it's like, I don't know how they could have done it much better. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't change that foundation, that's probably one of the better ways that they could have handled it. And so I think for that reason, I've kind of given Arkham Knight's story not a pass, but like, I'm just like, well, I can't see how they would have done it better, so I can't criticize it too much.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's like the arena they're playing in, this was the best possible product, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't aim for loftier
absolutely.
Things and want these to be kind of elevated and want them to reach the heights of the things we've seen previously, or not even things we've seen previously, because I also dislike this thing that happens where, because you did something once, people only want the old thing. And if you do, we talked about it in part 1, but if you do the old thing again, people are annoyed because it's the same thing. But if you do something new, you get criticized because it's not your old stuff. Like, you can't win, really. And that's sometimes the way that people perceive art. And it's more just, there was a lot of work they did here that doesn't really pay off ever, or in a satisfying way.
Because I also think that the criticisms against this story are very valid, and I don't think they're coming from a place of like, oh, it's new and it's different, therefore it's bad kind of thing.
I think definitely with the Batmobile, that's probably where some. I
think to an extent, yeah, it could be, but I don't know, because I'm always of the idea of like, this is new and different, so I'm like more biased in favor of that new thing.
Yeah, same.
because I like mix-ups.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. Let's talk about kind of the little ending, the little epilogue here. So after Batman ensures Gotham is safe, Gordon dispatches the police to reclaim the streets of Gotham, and Batman activates the Nightfall Protocol to protect his loved ones. And basically, he goes to his home. It's surrounded by reporters. With him and Alfred, the pair sort of enter the manor, and it explodes, seemingly killing them both. Sometime later, Gordon, now mayor of Gotham, prepares to attend Oracle and Robin's wedding. And elsewhere in the city, two muggers attack a family in an alley, but are confronted by a nightmarish figure resembling Batman. And that's our whole game, really. Kind of wrapped up neatly.
I think I'd like to quickly get this off my chest. Getting that ending that we talked about, the Nightfall Protocol, is a bitch and a half because you have to do half of all the side quests. You have to do 7 out of 14 most wanted missions. I think Scarecrow counts for one of them in order to get that ending. But then it cuts off right after the mansion blows up. And it says if you want to see the full Nightfall ending, you have to do all the side quests. And that means all the Riddler trophies too. And it's like, fuck me. No, and so I don't know. If any of you are still watching that haven't played the game and you're thinking, oh, I might give it a shot, just Google the ending.
Google it, yeah.
Just Google it. It's not...
It wasn't worth it, man. I did the whole thing. I did the whole 100%. It wasn't worth it.
I thought it was worth it just for the satisfaction. It was not worth seeing that ending, but it was worth at least saying, because now I've collected all the Riddler trophies across the entire series. That feels good.
It's good. Yeah.
So what do you think about this? I want to focus on that figure, that mysterious floating figure. What do you think of that?
I don't think it's supposed to be literal. I think a lot of people have done like the like game theory thing where they're like, what game, like Batman's using fear toxin, and I'm like, yeah, sure.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought for ages.
Which is fine. I think that's a completely fair reading. I'm kind of less interested in what's literally happening than what they're trying to say, like thematically, I guess. Because, you know, Batman's revealed to be Bruce Wayne, right? And so in order to protect the people he cares about, he actually gives up the legacy he's been building. What he was so afraid of previously, which was losing what this legacy meant. Now he's in a position where he can kind of safely let it go. You know, he can let it go and kind of go and have a life of his own, is I guess what's implied there. And so for me, when we get this recreation of the alley sequence, you know, the crime alley sequence where it's the family, it's the young kid, you know, a la Bruce Wayne, a la Martha and Thomas Wayne, you know, it's representing that whether or not this scene is really happening, whether or not there's really this mythical bat creature, the point there is that suddenly that moment that caused him such trauma, that irreversibly changed him, now there is a symbol that is causing the criminals who made that happen to stop and to reconsider. There's something for them to be afraid of. There is recourse. There is a symbol out there that represents that they can no longer create that trauma. In the same way that, you know, the Joker, like you said, just had that really bad experience, that one bad day became twisted, you know, by the circumstances, the environment. Now Batman's built a symbol that means that he can protect people from that the people are insulated further from that, you know, that Gotham is, I guess, like safer or better off.
Yeah.
And he voluntarily gives up his legacy, which is the very thing the Joker could never do. The Joker was so afraid of it. Batman gives it up. He volunteers to do that. And the result is not that he's forgotten, but in fact that his symbol has persevered even more. That it's allowed to take on a life of its own, which in this case is this kind of demonic thing. And, you know,
do you think that he did give up his legacy? Because I was kind of following what you were saying there for a sec, but I was thinking, like, because he's taken on all these apprentices, like, you know, Tim Drake, Nightwing, and you have Oracle still working, and they're all still operating post Arkham Knight, as we see in some of the DLCs. And so where I thought you were going to go with that is that they are carrying on that legacy. And so while, yes, Bruce sort of gave up that moniker of the Batman, that legacy and that idea of criminals thinking twice, essentially, is still present and is going to be carried on by, you know, Nightwing and Robin, and theoretically Red Hood, because Red Hood does have a DLC that takes place, I believe, after the events of Arkham Knight. But I don't believe he's working in tandem with the Bat family, but bottom line, there are these people that are punishing criminals regardless.
Yeah, that too. And, yeah, it's like inspired because anyone can be Batman. You know, that's the whole point.
Yeah. And I think his reveal might have actually inspired more vigilantes. And I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know how you see that.
It's a good question. It's a really good question. I mean, yeah, it's tricky because in this story it makes sense, right? It makes sense to inspire, you know, that there are going to be people out there with the means and the capability to kind of carry on this legacy. But I don't necessarily. I mean, I think if the game was saying, okay, you know, Damian Wayne took up the mantle and literally replaced him, it would have shown that. It wouldn't have been the demonic kind of creature. It would have been literally showing us the next Batman. Which is why I think it's more important. Like, you're right, there is that family to carry it on. There's a security there that people are still doing this good work. But also, like, Tim and Oracle have continued on with their life. They're getting married. Like, they're having a life outside of this vigilante kind of thing that kind of consumed Bruce's life. So yeah, that's an interesting point. Whether or not I agree with the philosophy of like, okay, let's keep inspiring more vigilantes, I don't know. I think maybe what's more interesting to me is, you know, that he's managed to achieve this and conquer those fears and kind of conquer those doubts, and he never did cross that line. I think that's the important thing, that the symbol's able to live on. I mean, the idea ultimately is not that everyone should put on a cowl and go beat up thugs, but that, you know, but if everyone is a bit more like Batman, then the world would be a far better place. You know, if we were a bit more self-sacrificing and we put the needs of others above our own, then by definition, things would get better.
Yeah. And so the reason why I bring up the Bat family is because, as we've mentioned, you know, Batman has to come to terms with sort of giving up the cowl in a sense. And across the game, he says on multiple occasions that, like, you know, it's his last night as Batman, and, like, you know, and he says to Dick Grayson, he says, like, you know, I'm not going to see you ever again. Says the same to Catwoman, and he says his goodbyes on multiple occasions throughout the story, as if he's sort of, it almost seems like he's waiting for that opportunity, as if he's tired. He's done what he can, and to me, that Bat family sort of symbolizes, like, okay, now he can rest, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think that build up throughout the story, whether or not that's what they were intending, I think that is some food for thought, I guess.
And it definitely lands for me that way, you know, that he is ready to retire here. I mean, a little small tidbit that I love is that in Arkham City, when you run across Calendar Man, he's like, listen, I'm seeing all this shit, man. I was there at your beginning. I'll be there at the end.
And he's
there at the end. I love little details like that are in this fucking story.
Yeah, he's in the crowd when they're showing the footage of the mansion.
Yeah,
I think that's awesome.
The little stuff like that I really like, and it just creates this nice kind of, it puts a nice bow on things, makes it very neat, which I like a lot. Yeah. Look, I would still like to see stories take place in this kind of universe they've constructed. I'm excited to see what they do with this next game. I am a big fan of the concept of that canceled sequel, the Damian Wayne kind of story that they were discussing, but maybe that's because it was never made. I just think there's like something nice about imagining what it could have been.
Also, I don't know if you knew, but Gotham Knights has been confirmed separate from the Arkhamverse.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. It's its own thing.
So wait, is it the Suicide Squad game that's in the same universe then?
I think so.
Right. Because
that one's developed by Rocksteady.
So it is that way around, not what I was saying. Yeah, okay, yeah, you're right.
But in the Suicide Squad game, looks like it's taking after the movies, like the movie, more than the pre-established Arkham characters. If we want to go on a quick tangent, I don't like that. I don't like that all these video game characters are starting to look more like their real life movie counterparts.
It worked really badly in the Marvel game. I don't know why they're doing it, guys. It's not a good idea.
Yeah, like for Avengers, it didn't work out well, and then they changed Peter Parker's face to make it, and it looks more like Tom Holland, and I'm like, guys,
it's so funny.
Because we could go on a tangent about this, but like the whole face controversy for Spider-Man was brutal. Because like I like the old face more, but I'm not gonna go threaten Insomniac about the face change and threaten their lives.
I like the old face better, but the new one makes way more sense in the context of the game. He actually looks about 25 instead of looking like 30.
But I was just thinking, like, somebody with that much stress that he's under would probably look like they're 30. And that's why I like the old design, because he looks so tired. He's got dark circles under his eyes, huge wrinkles on his forehead, like he's bagged all the time.
Yeah, he truly is.
And in the other one, it looks like it looks like he's like more 18.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, look, I don't. How do I say this delicately? The way that things look on film is very particular. The way that you can make things look on film and television is a very particular aesthetic. And video games, for the most part, when they try and do similar aesthetics, fail because of the nature of the medium and the nature of the way that you are literally creating images and rendering them. A part of me is thinking that the trailer isn't in-game footage, so it's clearly a rendered cinematic. So I don't know if the game is going to feel more like the Arkham style art, or if it's going to lean more into the sort of the kind of the movie look of Suicide Squad. And if you were going to pick anything to,
I'm okay with that.
But if you were going to pick anything to replicate, why would you pick a very bad movie? Like it.
But the movie, I thought the designs weren't that bad.
The designs were fine, but the movie was dog shit. So like, I don't understand why you'd be tying yourself to reference material that sucked. Like, it's just baffling to me. That's all. Like,
I didn't mind Suicide Squad.
I was able to
turn off. I was able to turn off my my brain, and it was great.
I resent it still because they didn't do press screeners for that one, so we had to go to the midnight release, which A is just with all the regular fans. There were some hardcore DC people there, but B, getting older now, and midnight releases are not. They don't sit well nice now. You know, I don't bounce back like I used to. And I remember it was about halfway through that movie. I just got really annoyed that it was still going. I was like, I'm tired. This is going nowhere. This is not good. I remember Ben sitting next to me, like I could see him feeling the same thing, and we're like halfway through, and it's already 1 a.m. and I'm like, this is not worth our time.
I just haven't thought about it for more than 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And I know that if I do, the story and everything will just fall apart. So I'm staying in this like blissful ignorance about the movie.
Live in that space. Don't think about any of the structure. Don't think about how they use any of the characters. It's fine. The question I had for you as we wrap things up is, you asked me this before, and I'm curious to see what you think. Are there stories that you'd want to see take place in this universe? Is there more you wanted, or did you feel like this was kind of a nice conclusion?
I feel like I've seen enough. I feel like it has been the gameplay has been evolved to the point where the only thing that they could marginally improve on would be the Batmobile. And I think based on the reception of this game and based on the reception of the Batmobile, there's no way they're going to do that. As far as like Batman stories that I'd want to see adapted, there aren't really any. Like that Damian Wayne game in a post-apocalyptic world would be cool and all, but like I wouldn't mind reading through a comic or something like that, because I feel like if they can't improve the gameplay, what's the point of making another game?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or if they can't switch it up. That's why I think Gotham Knights, they can't improve on the gameplay, and so I like that Gotham Knights is not trying to. They could have made another Arkham game, but you know, I like that they're trying something new and different, and they're trying a different gameplay style that can be evolved and worked on and improved and refined. And I would prefer that rather than, say, I don't know, Batman Arkham Afterlife, where like Bruce comes back somehow, or like we play as Robin the whole game.
Yeah.
Like I think all the, whether or not the all the arcs in the Arkham universe were tied up well, regardless, they've been tied up.
Yes.
I don't think, aside from that post-credit scene, the game doesn't really leave any unanswered questions in my eyes, and I think the post-credit scene, I think the point is that it's supposed to leave that sort of ambiguous, like kind of figure it out yourself kind of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, no, I have no desire to see another Arkham game, because I'm of the belief that, like, if I want to play Arkham, I'm just gonna go back and play Asylum, play City, because we've already gotten that.
They're still there.
And so, yeah, it's like we brought up Assassin's Creed earlier. It's like a lot of fans have asked for the developers to ditch the RPG style and go straight back to making those action games like Unity or Syndicate or Assassin's Creed 2. And it's like, but if I want that, I'm just gonna go back and do that because they made such similar games over and over that they've sort of exhausted that formula. And so there's not a whole lot more that they could do with it. And so I think that, the same thing applies to Arkham in that if I want to go back and play an Arkham game, I have 4 of them now. And
there's plenty there.
All with unique... Pardon?
There's plenty of them there.
Yeah. And there's tons of DLC, especially for Arkham Knight. There's tons of DLC.
It's all really good, too.
Yeah, well, be careful. Don't say
okay.
that too loudly.
I enjoyed playing it. Should I rephrase? I enjoyed playing the DLC.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it too. I made a video on why I liked it, and you mentioned coming up to the release of like Arkham City and whatnot. When I was playing those games and like Arkham Origins, I remember watching this this YouTuber, and I won't say it because there's no beef or anything, but I remember watching him, and I watched a ton of his videos on the coverage of those games. And when I released my Arkham Knight DLC video, he made a video in response basically saying that, like, no, this season pass sucked. And I'm like, oh my god, I used to watch you.
That's amazing.
And it was like
That's so good.
It was the
That's so
experience. Good. And, like, it worked out really poorly for him because just the way that he kind of structured it, it made it seem like it made him seem a little more, I guess, aggressive than, like, he meant it to be. And so in the comments, people are thinking that, like, we totally have beef, but, like, I've talked to him in DMs and whatnot, and he has been nothing but friendly to me and, like, super nice about it. And it's, and so that's just a funny story, great. I thought it was really cool.
I love that. No beef, all gravy. That's the way it is.
Yeah. Because I told him, I'm like, if you disagree, who cares, right?
Hey, we're all just here doing our thing, man,
Just shooting the shit about video games.
He's got the time for that drama. I love it.
Exactly.
Look, I've really enjoyed this. This has been quite a journey. I feel like I learned something. I feel like every time we do this show, I learn something.
Same here.
It's funny. I think what I'm left with overwhelmingly is that slight sense of like, I kind of wish this had been more than it was. And that might just be wishful thinking. Like maybe it's just that this was never going to reach whatever expectation that we had created after Arkham City. Like you don't have a sophomore hit like that. It doesn't happen. And when it does, then you try and do a third one and it's tough. Like you look at the way that people talk about The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, it's hard when your second one is like so good. People talk about that movie, Dark Knight. It's one of the best. It's not just one of the best superhero movies. It's one of the best movies there is. And same thing with Arkham City. It's a great Batman game, but it's also one of the greatest games there is. And that kind of puts you in an awkward position where it's like, whatever you do next, you're comparing it to, what you've done prior, and that's maybe unfair. Maybe it's unfair to say,
I think for me personally, when it comes to Arkham Knight, I don't think that my wishful thinking, or our wishful thinking more accurately, is for something that lives up to those expectations or for something that is better than Arkham City. I think it just could have been better than what it is in my eyes. And it could have just done more. I don't expect I'm not expecting the game to blow me out of the water and have this mind-boggling story like Arkham City does, because even when I first played it, I saw The Hangover 1, then 2, and then the third one, and I was like, okay, there clearly something went wrong here,
Yep.
And it's like, and it's, a lot of people know, it's like as the sequels go on, you get diminishing returns, and it's hard to top something, especially like you said, something as good as Arkham City. I know that like people are going to call me like super hypocritical because I made a video talking about why I think Arkham City isn't as good as everyone says, which is true. I think it's really good, but I don't think it's like a masterpiece and that it's like the best ever.
Yeah.
I just think that it is really, really fucking good. And I think it's hard for Arkham Knight to kind of fill those boots. And so when we're talking, I feel like I could probably speak for you too, that when we're talking about wanting more, it's not that we're wanting that same story or that same quality. Like, even if it's, I'd be totally happy with something like Origins, where it's like, a lot of people say that origin story is good, but they like cities more. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I think for Arkham Knight, like, it was just...
Yeah, I think it was more that they put their shot out there, they shot their shot, and they didn't execute on it particularly well.
They missed.
And that's hard, but also in part because their swings weren't that big. You know, if they'd gone for the fences, I would have been like, damn, okay. But they kind of were like, okay, this seems safe. People know Jason Todd. This will kind of fit nicely. A lot of it felt not like it wasn't taking risks, but like that they were kind of always playing a bit safe. It's sort of how it felt.
But I feel like putting the Joker in the story is like the personification of playing it safe. You know what I mean? Like, that's a super playing it safe move in my eyes.
And it's something
because it's like
something I don't see Paul Dini doing that. And I don't want to put all my eggs in the Dini basket, because I know that he's not writing every single beat of these things, but you know, you need people to challenge that shit. You need people that say, well, hang on, like, maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe let's reach for something. Yeah. You know, and it just kind of left me wanting. And I think that's probably it left me wanting because it didn't shoot for something new. It's exactly what we were saying before. I think art should always try and evolve and do something different, and they did that in little bits, but maybe overall it just didn't quite get there. But I still really like this.
I think we should also. Yeah, sorry. What were you saying?
No, I also think it's important to note. I know that this is a 2-hour discussion, so people are here for nuance, but I did really enjoy this game, and I've enjoyed it every time I've touched it as well. Like, the gameplay is just cracklingly precise.
The exact same.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I think gameplay-wise, Arkham Knight is my favorite by far, no competition. Yeah. But I just think the story is really where it falls. Well, the story and boss fights too, are where it falls in my eyes. But I don't think that stops the game from being like a solid 10. Like, if you had to put some sort of number on it, which I don't like doing, but yeah.
I think we're legally not allowed to on this show. I think if we do that, the review people come after us.
Okay, just beep it out.
Yeah, beep it out. You don't need to know what was said. Yeah, look, I don't really have much else that I really wanted to touch on. I think we've covered it pretty extensively. I would love to know, if you're listening or watching, like, what your experience has been with this property. Particularly what you thought of the Batmobile, particularly if there are other stories you'd like to see in this universe, maybe. If there are other concepts you maybe wanted to see them explore. I'm fascinated to hear about it. And yeah, let me know what you guys kind of thought of it. We'll kind of wrap ourselves up here. Nolan, it's that time. Where can people find you on the internet? What should they be checking out?
They should just be looking for my YouTube page, That Boy Aqua. I'm also on Twitter, at That Boy Aqua, but I don't post too much about like YouTube stuff on there. It's more of just like shit posts and like other weird opinions.
Love it.
So I mean, follow me there if you want. I'm gonna plan to cover Arkham Asylum at some point on my channel, very within the next few months. Cool. I'm also trying to review all of the Assassin's Creed games, which is a daunting task, but we're halfway there. Yep.
Do you know what your next one's going to be? Do you know what the next one's going to be?
I like looking at a lot. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do you know what the next Assassin's Creed you're going to cover is yet? Have you decided?
Okay, I'll let you know a little secret. I get so many requests to review Assassin's Creed 3. And so what I'm going to start doing is like just dance around it and leave Assassin's Creed 3 as the very last one. But at the end of each video, like in Revelations, I built it up as if the next one I was going to review was Assassin's Creed 3. And then I did the same thing in my Valhalla review. And so I'm just going to keep blue-balling my audience.
Amazing.
Because I think it'd be funny.
Amazing. Well, that's the little reward for anyone that made it this far in. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so good. That game's...
Because I'm going to get to it at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that game was so controversial when it came out.
It is.
Story's so good though. Fuck, it's so well written. Anyway, I'm the only person in the world that thinks that, by the way. It's me and Patrick.
I didn't mind it, but I haven't played it since last year, and I played Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered, which the remaster was broken. It didn't work. I couldn't complete a series of
good.
quests.
That's good.
So.
That's great.
Yeah. You can tell my review is just going to be glowing.
Yikes. Well, with that shocking revelation, look, you guys, you know where to find us. We're ZeroIndent everywhere on the internet. The best way to help this show out is to tell one person that you think might like it. Just send it to them, be like, hey, check this out. If there's something you want us to cover, projects you want us to look at, let us know. You can tweet me at DCMIHatePie, or you can hit us up at ZeroIndent.com. If you want to buy my books, you can head to MaynardTrig.com. That's pretty much all I've got to plug. This has been an absolute treat. Thank you for joining me, Nolan. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. I was gonna say this has been a really nice experience.
I've had a good time. I feel like we learned something, and that's what this is all about.
We talked about that the other day. Like, the point of a debate or like an argument is to just learn some more shit, and I feel like I learned some shit, and I like that.
That's the way, man. Well, look, thank you guys so much for listening or watching. Be sure to check us out when we jump back in with whatever we're covering next. I'm sure in the future I'll be dragging Nolan into more stuff. Go check out his YouTube. Go check out his Twitter. We'll catch you guys next time.